Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have join us Dr. Kevin Fickenscher. He is a physician and he has led both domestic and international companies in the area of healthcare. And he is also an entrepreneur. He has authored a book that we're going to be talking about today, and he's got some great lessons that he's learned in his career. Looking forward to today's conversation with Kevin. I'd love for you to give a little bit of your career story to people that are listening, and look forward to our conversation.
Sure. Well, my career story is that I graduated from medical school in University of North Dakota. And like many North Dakotans, I wanted to get out of there. So I did. I went to the Bronx in New York City.
Wow.
For my residency program, which was a real learning experience. On my first day of residency, I had to apply for food stamps, which was a really good education for me. And so I was in the residency program in social medicine. I went back home, though, to North Dakota and practiced there for 10 years and also set up the Center for Rural Health. And in that capacity, I really got very involved in rural health issues and how we could deliver better care to people living in rural America. That was my big focus for a bunch of years. And then I got became an assistant dean, did turnaround of an academic program, then moved into more mainstream management and served as a chief medical officer for a couple of very large healthcare systems. So, and more recently, the last 10, 15 years, I've really moved into the IT and, related space, technology space, as it applies to healthcare.
Okay. So if you were to spin back time and talk to that 22-year-old Kevin, who at the time probably thought he knew a lot, what advice would you give him?
That's a great question. I would say be open to possibilities. Be open to, particularly in today's world, one of the things I've actually been working on is a program where I really think that the fundamentals of medicine are going to change so dramatically over a relatively short period of time because of the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of the other elements that are related to those areas. It's going to change the way we interact with patients. It's going to change our knowledge base, how we use the knowledge, et cetera. So I would say be open to change and embrace it, because it's going to happen regardless.
So think back to that time where you were a doctor and you had your patients and those were the people that you interacted with. What that first leadership position that you had, think about back to that time. What do you wish you would have known earlier about leadership?
Well, gosh, that's a good question. I wish I had known how to ask really good questions that could extract information from people. And I use the word extract very specifically. Really pull information from people so that I could develop a better foundational understanding of the issues that were in front of us. One of the beliefs that I have is that if you're going to be an effective leader, you really need to not only listen carefully, but then you need to integrate carefully and take that information that you're listening to or that you're hearing and really try to integrate it so that you get all the various perspectives put together so that you can lead everyone, not just a couple of people.
That's good. So I know you wrote a book. We're going to talk about that and just some of the topics that are included in that book. But I know in the preface you talk about just some of the people that have had impact on your life and the mentors that you've kind of drawn from. Talk about just some of those people and just kind of what are some things that you learned from them?
Probably the most important mentor was the gentleman who was the dean of North Dakota who recruited me back home to set up the rural health program. And I guess I have to say that I even though I was excited about it and I thought that this was a wonderful opportunity, etc., I also realized very quickly that I was in over my head. But he was sort of a stabilizing force for me, if you will, and became my go-to person for trying to manage all those anxieties, all those issues. Here I was just freshly, graduated from my residency program, and I'm meeting with the Speaker of the House of North Dakota. I'm giving speeches. I'm testifying in front of Congress. I'm, going to all these places, and it's like, and it was kind of an overwhelming experience. And he really helped to ground me, and I think that was an important part of early stage leadership learning.
You told me in our previous conversation that you had opportunity to work for definitely a character in kind of our history, Ross Perot. Talk
Yes.
a little bit about that experience and just anything you learned during your time working with him.
Well, I think Ross Perot was a fabulous leader. First of all, I'll say that. I think politically, he and I maybe were on different places, but I got to know him, and I really sincerely appreciated his style. For example, let me give you a very specific example. At the Perot headquarters in Dallas, Texas, we had a big sort of cafeteria, and it was not uncommon for me to go down, or anybody actually, not just me, people to go down to the cafeteria, sit down by themselves, have lunch, and all of a sudden Ross would come over and say, "May I join you?" And he would sit down and he would start asking questions. And his goal really was to find out what were the things that we were facing, those of us who were on the front line, who were dealing with the customers. What were we experiencing? What were the problems that we had? Did we have any issues that the company could help solve? And he was a really good listener. And I'm sure that he used those sessions at lunchtime as a tool for gaining really good understanding of what was going on the front lines. So, he was a master at that.
And you actually did a pretty good imitation of him last time we talked.
Well, yeah. Here's the deal. So I was asked to go to London and to be in charge of international, which was everything outside of North America. And I was having a fabulous experience. I was really enjoying it. And we were growing the business. I was taking folks, we were going into China, we were going into the Middle East, we were going into all these different places, and we were developing programs, and we were growing very, very rapidly, having a lot of success. And Mr. Perot, and Barack Obama was elected president at that time. Mr. Perot comes to London, and he says, "So, Barack Obama has been elected president, and it's really, I think, going to have a real impact on the company because at my previous company, when we had a change of administrations, there was a real growth in the healthcare sphere, and I think that's going to happen under Obama. He's been talking about healthcare." And I said, yeah, I know. I think I agree with you. I think that's really important. But I really like living here in London. I really like what I'm doing. I'm having a fabulous time. We're growing the business. He says, "Yep, I understand. But this is really important for the business." I said, "Yeah, but I think I'll stay in London." He says, "Son, you don't understand. You're moving to Washington." I said, "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir." So he was really persistent, Persistence actually is actually another element of being a good leader. You got to be persistent.
Yeah. Well, you wrote an interesting book, which again, is you look at kind of give me a little bit of your background, and it's entitled "Toto's Reflections: The Leadership Lessons from the Wizard of Oz."
Right.
Very, Definitely caught my attention when I read the title.
Yeah. Well, the reason I wrote the book is that I have to say, I've got this library at home, and I have oodles of leadership books. And one of the problems with the leadership books is that many of them are very theoretical. Some of them are very, very good, but they're sort of conceptual. And the issue is, so how do you explain that to people? And it really came to me that I really think that the lessons from The Wizard of Oz are lessons that are very apropos to being an effective leader. And so I use those lessons that were existent in the story as a way of defining what are the key elements of good leadership.
So give a couple of your favorite lessons from the book.
So let me start with the very first one, which is on leaping. And on leaping is, if you remember the story, and if you've seen the movie, one of the things that happens is that Miss Gulch comes over to Dorothy's farm, and she grabs Toto because Toto has done something to her yard. And she puts him in a basket, and off she goes off into her homeland. And as she's going, all of a sudden, Toto lifts the lid on the basket and he looks out and sort of goes down and he comes back up and he takes a leap. And one of the first lessons of leadership is that it's always good to get away from the small gulches in life if you're willing to take a leap. And so sometimes, as a good leader, you have to take a leap. You have to use the information you've got around you. You have to digest that information, and you got to jump from that basket and go for it. And that's what Toto did.
Hmm.
So that's one of the lessons. One of my other favorite ones is on munchkins. One of the things that I think, and this is what Ross Perot was a master at. This is the thing that I was just describing, which is you really miss the magic and the intelligence of all of those around you if you think of them as little people. Instead, you got to embrace them because they have the answers. And in fact, in my personal experience as a leader, I've really learned over time that the answer is frequently all around me. The question is, am I hearing it? Am I listening to it? Am I getting my team to listen to it? So on Munchkins is another important one. And then of course there's the three, on thinking, on heart, on courage. Those are also important. On thinking, it's not about having brains, it's about what comes from reflection and soul. So as a leader, you really need to reflect on the information that you're getting and digest it. And it's not necessarily about having, a big brain. On heart is about how you feel, and it's not just the beat inside. On courage is about your commitment and not just having prowess. So those are a couple of the sort of introductory elements of leadership that I talk about in the book, Toto's Reflections.
Okay. Well, encourage people to pick up that book and tell me a little bit. Growing up in North Dakota, I grew up in Iowa, and so I
Yeah.
had probably a similar experience growing up. But what are some things that you learned from growing up in North Dakota?
Well, gee, that's a really good question. I learned the power of the community.
Hmm.
Um, in North Dakota, I was talking to somebody about this recently. In North Dakota, as I was growing up as a kid, I literally knew almost everybody that was around me. And if I didn't know them, I knew somebody who knew them, and we were like a community. We were really tight. Versus the world that I moved into, I didn't know everybody. I didn't have a sense of who they were. And yet, if you approach people properly and with an openness, you can build a community around you that is very strong, just as strong as the one that I grew up in North Dakota.
Mm.
Because I think it is the community that I grew up in that has really helped me over the years to be the person that I am. So that was a key element and lesson from North Dakota. And that the answers are also there's a lot of wisdom. I learned this in rural health. There's a lot of wisdom in going out and talking to the farmers in the field who are just kicking dirt, or who you think are just kicking dirt, but yet they have incredible knowledge, incredible perspective. And it's not just the people in the cities and in the big towers. It's the people on the front lines.
Yeah, that's great. I know you said you have a large library of leadership books. What books do you typically recommend or would recommend to other leaders?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I have a list in front of me of those books. Lately, actually, lately I've been reading lots of books about um, sort of looking at yourself. So Eckhart Tolle is a really good author who's written lots of books on sort of contemplation. And I think leaders need to really learn how to be more contemplative and to not necessarily react in the moment, if you will. Those are not necessarily books on leadership, but
Sure.
they're books
Yep.
that are really critical for gaining a true strength of leadership, I guess is the right word.
Favorite quotes?
Vision is the art of seeing things invisible.
Hmm.
Vision is the art of seeing things invisible. That's my one that I frequently use all the time.
Sure.
Um, that's the one that comes to mind.
Outside of work, what do you like to do to recharge?
Well, I live on a bay off of the Atlantic Ocean up in Maine, and we have 10-foot tides.
Mhm.
And one of the things I like to do is I like to sit in my fire pit and I watch the tides go up and down. We go all the way from 10 foot up down to mud flats. And you can actually see the water, coming in. And it's really, I find it very relaxing to sit there and then, think about all the issues that we're facing in the world. I was talking with one of my friends the other day about how we're seemingly in a period of real significant angst across the world. And I think it relates to the fact that we're going through a revolution, if you will. We've had the Industrial Revolution, that's sort of behind us now. We had the economic revolution, where we went from small businesses to big corporations. And now we're going through a revolution of information and how we gather information, how we use it. And it's happening much, much faster than all the previous revolutions. And that's causing lots of angst. And I think we're seeing that played out in lots of different areas across the world.
Mm. So, what are you most excited about as you are looking at healthcare and you're a part of that? Talk a little bit about the company and kind of your focus of what you're doing.
Well, yeah, my focus is around making healthcare better, and that has been my focus ever since I was a medical student. Actually, I was elected president of the American Medical Student Association back in the day, and I remember sitting down with myself. Somebody said to me, "Kevin, you really need to sit down with yourself and have a conversation about what's important." And I sat down and I did that for a couple of hours, and I decided that making healthcare better was really what I was going to be all about. And that has been my mantra for all these decades. And it continues to be my mantra. I really think that we're on the verge of some very significant changes in how we're going to manage and organize and pay for healthcare as we move towards a value-based model. It's really been interesting. I've been talking about value-based, for the last 10 years or so. Hasn't really taken off until the last year, when all of a sudden we're seeing a real dramatic increase in the number of organizations, particularly healthcare payers, that are moving towards value-based. The question then becomes, how do we define that? How do we make sure that outcomes are appropriate, et cetera? So that's one significant change. I think it's also being driven not just by healthcare payers, but it's also being driven by the government. The fact that we have so many boomers like myself that are going to stress the system and that are using resources. I mean, healthcare at the present time represents 19% of the GDP of the United States. That's huge. That's the largest sector outside of giving money away to people. So, we really have an issue in this country, and it's not just in this country; it's worldwide. So
a lot of our listeners are first-time leaders. Maybe have stepped into that first leading a team. What parting advice would you give to a new leader?
I would say that it's really important as a leader to, first of all, engage those that are working with you in true open conversations about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And be open to their approach and to the approach of their colleagues, and put that on the table. Have an open table, if you will, of conversation. And do that on a regular basis with your team. Because building a team is the most important factor. Matter of fact, let me give you a specific example on that. I've been working for the last couple of years on a startup, and it basically was a notion of trying to provide primary care services on a virtual basis with face-to-face physicians, because they don't really have the time to set up the infrastructure, the capabilities to do all of that. And it's very difficult to do face-to-face and virtual at the same time, or in the same environment. So doing that on an outsourced basis, like I learned at Perot, where we took over outsourced systems, but nobody knew that we were there, because I think it needs to be done on a white label, is a really important approach. So what's the lesson there? The lesson is that I really felt that if I was going to be successful, we needed to have the very best team in place. And so I spent all of my time for the first year recruiting team members to work on that particular initiative. Well, now we're experiencing this, and it's really very, very exciting. And it's not because of anything I did, it's because of the team. And so having an effective team, I think, is really one of the crucial components of being an effective leader.
Well, Kevin, I sure appreciate time you've spent with us today, and I know it's going to be helpful to our listeners, and definitely wish you continued success in all you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. Good to talk to you, Mark.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.